Welcome to our panel. My name is Tracy Levesque.
My name is Mika Epstein. My pronouns are she and her.
And my pronouns are also she and her. And today, we will be telling the story of the website we co-founded, built, and run, Levesque TV. Starting with our love of TV origin stories.
I don't really have this one defining moment that I can look at and say, aha, this is when I started watching television. Certainly, I've gone a few years in my life without actually having a television and living in the woods where you couldn't get a signal, but I also grew up with a Count Von Count doll who was my absolute favorite toy ever.
I didn't know you grew up living in the woods. I'm learning too.
When I went to boarding school, we talked about this. Yeah, I went to boarding school. There's a shock that I'm a lesbian. I'm also a huge Trekkie. Like Spock ears, the whole 9 yards, Starlog magazine. When Tasha Yar died, I was sobbing and inconsolable. So I'm like that level of Trekkie. And of course, when I got to college, I loved everybody's favorite, we're sure it's queer show, Xena. I used to record it on my VCR, because that's what we did, and when I would get home from class, I'd rewind it and watch it with my friends, and we'd have Xena watch parties. And no, Mom, liking Xena and liking women was not a phase. And I also liked the internet when it started to come about, and I was a member of Alt TV Fan ER, and I helped make the logos initially. It was my one foray into, I can design, and no, I can't. But what I can do is I can debug and I can solve problems. And all of these things, making fan sites for actors and shrines and things that still exist today, brought me here.
Now it's time for my story. I was raised on television, and one of my earliest memories was my mom feeding my baby brother, so I must have been around 3, and she would watch all my children. I remember watching it with her every day and getting really invested in the stories, and especially hating Erica Kane. I continued watching all my children through my teen and adult years, and lucky me, my wife, who I met in the 90s, also loves all my children. So we would come home from work, open the TiVo and watch that day's episode of All My Children. And then on Christmas Eve, 2000, after endless episodes of dancing around the issue, this happened. God, no sound. But I captioned it.
That is like the soapiest thing.
But the thing that's really great about that scene is they didn't put the dramatic music behind it. It was just dialogue, which never happens on a soap opera. So, oh my gosh, that's what happened. And then 3 years later, in April 2003, we had the first ever daytime soap opera lesbian kiss, and it was Lena and Bianca.
That was perfectly timed.
It was a classic, airport terminal kiss. And then, in 2004, after what felt like forever, Bianca kissed her friend Maggie. And they were, best friends. And everybody shipped these two, hard, And then it happened, and I could not believe that it actually happened. And this is the first time that this site doesn't exist anymore. I had to find it on the Internet Archives. But this was the first time that I found a fandom and took to the internet and found bamfans.com and read, other fans reviews of the show. And so this was my gateway into online fandom. And why did I take to the internet? It is because
we're computer geeks. I mean, for me, you expected this. I'm a Trekkie. Of course, I'm going to fall into computers. But
I'm not a Trekkie.
I didn't know that.
So what's my excuse? I don't know.
I don't know. We like to write code that looks like this. If you've seen our website, the shows we love code that's on the front page, that's actually what this is.
Real life, behind the scenes. Very exciting.
We wrote this. We wrote this on WordPress, and WordPress is open source software that you can use to build, design, and make websites. It powers just over 30% of the most popular sites on the internet today. An open source means that anybody can read it and edit it and learn about the code, which led to making communities of people who wanted to talk about making the code together and working on it together. And that led to talking at these community meetups like here about what we do with the code, like make sites like Let's Watch TV, which led to
WordCamp San Francisco 2013. At the time, this was the biggest WordPress conference, and I got elected to speak there. This is a really big deal for me. I live in Philadelphia. I flew across to San Francisco just myself. I didn't know anyone, and so I was at the speaker dinner, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, oh, there's a lesbian. I'll go talk to her. That lesbian turned out to be Mika.
I do not have a gaydar, so I did not realize that this is why Tracy came up and talked to me. I just thought, this was my first WordCamp ever as a speaker, and I was terrified for a lot of reasons, including my job interview was actually at this event. So here I met this wonderful, outgoing person, and we had a lot in common.
I'm wonderful.
You are wonderful. I still hate you for the other thing, but I love you. When we became friends, showing up at WordCamps like this, we started chatting online. It turned out we have an encyclopedic knowledge of queer television, and we would also watch anything with any gay in it. For example,
Chicago Fire. As always, when I heard there was going to be a queer character on a show, I would start watching it regardless of its quality. This is Shay, the queer character on the show. I watched the show. It wasn't a great show, but I watched it for the gay parts. And at the end of season 2, there was a huge explosion and a giant fire, and during the hiatus, it was like a big cliffhanger, right? Like everybody ran into the fire and you didn't know what happened. So during the hiatus, they teased that someone died in the fire. So on September 23rd, 2014, season 3 premiered, and we would find out who died. Guess who it was? Shocker, right?
Elizabeth.
No surprise. I was furious. I was chatting with Mika online. I was like, we need a database of shows of queer shows to know like which ones are worth watching, and does anybody die, and when does the queer plot start, and is a show worth watching?
I happen to work for a web hosting company, so I jumped online, and because I like puns, I bought the domain leswatchtv.com. It is exactly why you think. I spun up a website to start with, and then Tracy just started working on the theme, making it look good. We started working on the back-end code immediately. And yeah, this is the design. This is kind of a schematic of what the data was going to look like and what it was going to connect to and what it all meant, so that we could understand what were we building. Because if you build something without a plan, it usually falls apart.
I didn't have this plan. Mika made this plan.
This was made after the fact, sorry. It was on paper before. And I have this feeling that data on its own is boring. If I just throw numbers at you, it doesn't really give you any understanding of the meaning of the data. You have to have context to give it anything of value. So what goes into making a show subjectively watchable? These are the questions that we ask. Now, not everything, even on the best shows, is worth watching. We're going to grab what's notable and we're going to highlight it, like Callie and Arizona's wedding on Grey's Anatomy, or when Alex and Maggie. I'm just trying to make up new portmanteaus for them, apparently. When Sanders kisses for the first time on Supergirl, these are the moments that we want to know about. What do I need to watch to find the content I'm looking for? And then we have our characters, because once we know what makes a show worth watching, we need to start talking about the characters and how to identify them, and not just with the simple things of, well, this is a character and she plays someone who's queer online, but exactly what kind. Gender identity, sexual orientation, what actors are portraying them, what shows are they on. And we had to build it to handle things like Sarah Lance, and we will come back to her later. Then we have the nitty-gritty. We've got tropes like bury your queers and coming out in the bisexual love triangle. I hate that one so much. Then we have characters who have cliches, like how many addicts do we have? How many bartenders? Surprisingly, a lot of lesbian bartenders. How many are in prison? I don't like that number. And how many are closeted? And of course, stations is pretty obvious. What did it air on? Well, you get things like Netflix, though, and they have their originals, so we had to put in 2 stations that it airs on Netflix, but it originated in another country.
So behold, version 1 of Let's Watch TV. It's pretty sad. It's embarrassingly monosexual, and we fixed that later.
We realized pretty quickly that we were missing important data, that people were looking for how to get context, and we needed to give this to them. It's one thing to know that Sarah Lance dies. It's another thing to know she dies 3 times. So we started to identify good and bad qualities about shows, and we came up with things like show stars and warnings and air dates and IMDb, so that we could say if a show does good things, let's celebrate it, and if a show does bad things to characters, let's maybe warn people about Jessica Jones being a great show, but perhaps something you shouldn't watch with the little kids.
And here is version 2 of Let's Watch TV. Getting there. Still not where I wanted it to be. Like, I'm the visual half of us and the designer, and I really wanted to be a professional website that could compete with out there in the world. And we have the skill set, so this is version 2, not quite where I wanted it to be, but getting there.
And we wanted to let people know, in 2017, we realized we need to tell people what are the shows that we think are worth loving. And we started adding in web series. I actually have a physical book with web series from 1990 to 2014. It's got Carmilla on the cover. It's great. And I'm working my way through that still. But we needed to also be more flexible with sexuality and representation, because from web series you're going to have things that are a little bit more like the world. You have demisexual, which doesn't exist on network television yet. And for that, we needed to account for the diversity in characters by expanding what we covered.
So we had a big sprint on the new theme in October of 2017. My day job is I co-own a web development company with my wife in Philadelphia. And so I enlisted one of my employees, a designer, to help me with the theme. And I treated it like I would a project at work. Like I spun up a Trello board, I went into project management mode. And we put all of our code up on GitHub. GitHub is a public repository of code, so anybody can see the code that makes the site. You can contribute to it if you wanted to. You could download the code. You can fork the code and make your own thing. We believe in open source. We believe in open data and sharing with everyone. So you can see in this graph, the October, the huge spike in commits, because we are just, I love Halloween. And I just was in my house for 2 weeks, not even doing Halloween stuff, because I really wanted to get this done.
Wow.
Yes.
You didn't tell me that.
Yeah. No, like my neighbors didn't see me. Like I was just. But we finally got to the Let's Watch TV we know and love today. Woo! Yay! So yay, new site launch. Time to celebrate, right? Woohoo! Not so fast. We ran into some unforeseen issues. The first one we like to call
the L word overload. Besides just adding in every character that Shane never slept with, and I had a key command to just say another lesbian she slept with. It took over 96 seconds for the page to load because there are 62 characters. And as it turned out, we had a lot of issues that went into making that a problem. And I spent a lot of time speeding it up using caching and figuring out what was taking so long, where are the slowness, and pulling all, and there's a lot of technobabble. I have an entire talk dedicated to just how I debugged this specific problem. But I got it down to loading in around a second, which is crazy.
And next we have
Oh, yes. The orphan black blend. Okay, so this is actually not going to be the problem you might think it is. The problem, even though the Emmys can't list all the characters, the problem is that once we put Sarah Manning on a page, every character became Sarah Manning. Same picture, same name, same information. And I'm sitting there going, wait a second, that's Shay, that's Delphine. Hang on a second, something's wrong here. And you can go a while without noticing that because there are so many characters played by Tatiana on the same page. And it's funny, but it's maybe not the right thing to have going on.
And this is my favorite, soap operas, which is multiple actors playing the same character. So Bianca has been played by 2 different actors. So we had to figure out how are we going to list this. They also have the clone conundrum as well with the Maggie and Frankie played by the same actor. So we had to come up with a way to choose who is going to be the primary actor to represent the character. And Eden Regal is the Bianca that most people know and associate with Bianca Montgomery. So by putting her in the top position, she then, that actress represents the character. But we have the other actresses listed as well. But none of that compares to the most complicated hurdle on the site to date.
Sarah fucking Lance. I love my time-traveling bisexual assassin captain of the Wave Rider.
Don't we all?
I know. But we have to be clear here. She has a problem. She has a small dying problem. I'll let Damien explain.
I haven't heard from her since. So I'm guessing she's dead by now. That's the thing about Sarah Lynn, she never says dead for very long.
And the damn thing is he's right. So this isn't even counting. So she's been dead officially 3 separate times, but that doesn't count the 7 or 8 times we thought she was dead. So first off, I got to figure out what actually is death for Sarah Lance, which is not a sentence I thought I'd ever say, and what wasn't. And then she was portrayed by 2 separate actors. I'm betting some of you forgot Sarah 1.0. This is Jacqueline McInnes Wood. She was in the pilot episode for Arrow. This is pretty much the only scene we get her in. And then Sarah has another problem. She's been on 4 separate shows. 5 as soon as Batwoman comes out, I hope. She's a main character on Legends of Tomorrow. She's a recurring character on Arrow, where she died. She's a guest on Supergirl, where she bangs.
To put it bluntly.
But they had the sex talk in here before. And on Flash, she was a guest where she interrupted a wedding by making out with people, which I love. That's the best thing to do. But this made me think about how are we going to display and enter data in a way that's A, sustainable, and B, actually makes sense when you look at the page. So we came up with, there's a nice big block there for the shows, you'll notice, and we had to, because of her, we had to put in exactly what role you were on each show. And we had to put in the actors, and then RIP is a repeatable field now, which...
Who knew that was going to be a thing?
She's not the only character I've had to do that for, though. She's just the first. There is another. There were a lot of tears involved, by the way, in the making of this. I gave up a few times.
Now, as web developers, we're always thinking of how can we make the site better? We're always thinking into the future of features that people will want to be able to do when they get to our site. When you are in the development phase, the ideas come from Mika and I. However, when the site is live and starts getting traffic, you can look at the analytics, and then the ideas come from you all. So from the analytics, I could see that people were looking for out queer actors. So in 2017, we added actors. But wait, we had actors from the very beginning, right?
Yeah, I mentioned actors in the V1. If you looked at that spreadsheet, you'd see that. So the reality is that that was a text field that you typed in manually. And as it turns out, I can't spell. So people may not have been listed correctly. We ended up with 3 Ali Liebert pages at one point in time.
I'll take it.
Yeah, and also, as it turns out, I don't really have much of a gaydar, and it turned out that this whole thing just didn't sustain. So for actors, we said, let's actually show the data on people too, which gives us
a robust actor profile page. So now actors like my favorite Ali Liebert can have fully featured actor pages with all the information. If you scroll down further, it has a lot more data, it has all the characters they played, it has like their social profiles, their
IMDb, links to their homepage.
Right, and their sexual and gender orientation. Now, we do list actors' gender and sexual orientations, but only if they've self-declared, not if it's like oh, we know, or it was in TMZ or something like that. Because we understand it's not safe for everybody to be out yet. And so we have this policy, which has led us to accidentally tagging people, but as soon as anyone lets us know, we update it immediately.
Now that we have all of this data, though, how are we going to make it useful? How can we get our visitors to benefit from this?
As of this morning, we have 3,635 characters, 1,232 shows, 3,213 actors, and these have all been entered by us by hand.
She made me promise not to add any more. She didn't have to update the
Yeah,
slide.
I was like, do not add anybody before our slides, because I was done these slides like a couple days ago, and I'm like,
somebody
no.
told me about a
and
show
then
and
and
I'm
then Abby Thursday night, there was a new queer character, and she set it on auto schedule. I'm like, Mika.
I forgot.
So I had to run in and like change the slide real quick, but no big deal. It's cool. It's cool. Whatever. I'm fine. So what can we do with this data?
You can find the show you want to watch. You can filter. If you see the sidebar where it starts with search the database, actually if you scroll down on that page, you can sort and say, I want to look on specific stations in specific nations. I want to look for a show without death. You can sort them based on how many queer characters the show has. You can sort them based on the scores that we've given, and find what you're looking for. Find the kind of show you want. If you want a Western, we've got you covered. And this is the same with characters. Now you can see we've got filter characters. If you want to find all the transgender students, you can do that. You can narrow down, and if you want to try to find you, we're going to make our best effort to help you find yourself on television.
Now the site started out of anger, a backlash to barrier queers, and the death on Chicago fire. But now it continues out of positivity. I want to usher in a new day of positive queer representation and reward shows that do good. In 2017, we added the shows we love to the site. Now, we wanted people to be able to, and there's a feature block right on the homepage of shows we love, and then you can also click and see all the shows we love. We want people to be able to find good shows quickly. Now, the criteria for shows we love are me, Mika, and Nikki, who couldn't be here today. She's covering another panel. I'll have to agree that this is a show that we love. It has to be high quality and positive queer representation. It has to be a lot of screen time. It can't be every 4 episodes they're on for 2 seconds, and no shock value death. So something like Steven Universe or Vita, where there is an off-screen death, before the show starts, that still could get a show we love, but nothing where like someone is murdered in a tragic way.
There's a certain show you're probably familiar with because of the name of this conference that would not be listed.
Correct.
In 2016, we decided we needed to add a way to indicate the queerness behind the camera also. That's how we came up with the star rating system. Now, before you get mad at me, this is a play on the very problematic gold star lesbian thing. It's because we wanted to play off of that, but we wanted to do it in a more positive and, less problematic way, which gives us the gold star. Gold star shows are going to be things like the L Word, or Take My Wife, or X's and O's, where you've got a queer creators and you've got queer actors playing queer characters, and you can look at it and go, this is the gold star standard of how shows should be made for queer people.
Right, and the stories are mostly queer characters made for a queer audience. So you'll go and watch that show and it'll be, we are the target audience of that show.
Silver Star is the next step down. It's for a show that is still really super queer, and it's aimed at queers, but it might be aimed at queer women and queer men. So that's where you're going to get things like Queer as Folk. You also get Steven Universe, which is not really aimed queerly at anyone, but it totally is aimed at everyone like that. And you get Red. Maybe it doesn't have actors playing queer characters, but it's got queers behind the camera making things go forward. The Bronze Star goes for openly queer creators maybe, or openly queer actors, and stories that are for a general audience. And the reason that I always like to point out Sense8 is that this is a show that's got openly queer characters. It's made by 2 trans wonderful directors that just blow my mind every time I see their work. But Sense8 was made for the masses. It was made for everybody. And even though that last shot is of the dildo, it still is a show that was not necessarily...
I didn't know we were going there.
What the hell? We'll go there. It's still something that was made for the world on purpose.
In 2018, we added intersectionality to the website. Diversity and inclusion is super important to both Mika and I, and And in line with that, we rewrote all of our content on our website to be more inclusive of all sexual orientations and gender orientations. And so we try not to use any monosexual terminology unless it is appropriately describing a person. And we wanted to reward intersectionality because the way you move through life is not just about being gay or being a woman. There are multi-factors to a person's life that affect how they move throughout the world. And we wanted to reward shows that do more than just tell queer stories, but they tell intersectional queer stories.
Like?
Jane the Virgin. So they have 4 tags for intersectionality, diverse cast, feature immigrants, interracial relationships, and it's a person of color centric show. And you can click on any of those and see all of the shows with that intersection tag.
In October 2017, we added show scoring. I have to say that I'm not divorced, even though I did go a little beautiful mind while coming up with this. See, I live in Southern California. I went to a taping of One Day at a Time, and as we're standing in line, waiting to go into the show, I am struck by this idea. And suddenly, it just unfolded in my head. I knew exactly how I wanted to get this started. I whip out my notepad, because of course I'm going to take notes of a taping. And I just start writing things down and telling my wife about it. And the woman in front of us, she turned around, she looked at me, and I'm like, yeah, yes, I'm insane. I'm sure you feel that I am nuts.
Since everyone learns differently, and the math behind show scores are, to be honest, complicated, Mika is going to explain them from a math brain, and I am going to explain them from a visual perspective.
This jacket is actually my father's, and he was a mathematician.
My father was a mathematician too, but none of that stuck.
And whose fault is that now? We broke apart the concept of show scoring into 4 sections to understand the value of representation. Now, this does have a lot of crazy math, so we're going to give you context before we just start throwing formulas at you. Yes, there will be formulas. There's a test afterwards, and everybody who gets an A can have dinner with me.
On you.
Well, it's on you. Sorry. So let's get to the context first.
Now, here's my part. Each show score is broken down into 4 subject areas. You have ratings, character survival rate, character scores, and show tropes. Each of these 4 subject areas can earn from 0 to 100 points. So let's use this example real quick of 50 points for ratings, 70 for character scores, 60 for points, 60 for character survival, and 80 for show tropes. That total number of points is 260. And then we divide that number by 4, which my wife informed me that is getting the average. That's how little I know about math. And then you have a final score of 65.
Which is actually a pretty decent score.
Not bad. Okay, so that is the big picture overview of scores and how they are generated. Now, we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of each one of these 4 subject areas in detail.
The concept of ratings is applying everything that we already know about a show and assigning a numerical value. Ratings, realness, quality, and screen time already have a 0 through 5 value that you'll see on every page. You see the little hearts on our sidebar. That's what those ratings are. The worth it ratings, we call these the thumbs up, the thumbs down, and the guy doing the face. These are the ratings that we call the thumb values. And if they're negative, if the thumbs down, you lose points. If the thumbs up, you gain points. And the idea here is that this is us saying we thought the show was watchable or not. That's how we're going to do that. Stars are always going to be a plus. We're always going to add things to that. Triggers are always a minus. And if we love a show, we're going to give it extra points because, well, we love the show.
Ratings. I'm going to explain all the elements in math that goes into calculating the rating score. These are all of the sections of a show page that falls under our ratings category. We have heart ratings, worth it, the stars, trigger warnings, and a show we love. This is the kind of subjective part of show scoring because a lot of this is opinion. It's not like actually timing screen time, but it's like kind of eyeballing screen time. And, you know, the worth it, yes, no, there is opinion that goes into that. So this is the fourth of the ratings that's a little bit subjective. So each heart under realness, quality, and screen time earns a point. Easy, right? So in this example, this is for Black Lightning. It gets 13 points. And then that total is multiplied by 3 to get the final point count. So in this example, that's 13 times 3, which equals 39, making the total points for heart ratings 39.
That's called giving weight to a score.
This is where we give the show a thumbs up, thumbs down, or meh, in regards to it being worth watching or not. And the points here are pretty straightforward: 10 for up, 5 for and negative 10 for no. The star ratings are simple as well. 20 points for gold, 10 points for silver, 5 points for bronze. Trigger warnings only lose points: -5 for low, -10 for medium, and -15 for Game of Thrones.
I see we found the Game of Thrones folks back there.
And if it's a show we love, it gets 40 points. Woo!
Character survival rate is incredibly easy. If everybody's alive, you get 100 points.
Yay, everybody's alive.
If everyone's dead, you get no points. And everything else is a straight up, a queerly up percentage of what's in between.
Character survival rate. The number of queer characters a show kills off affects their score. Oh, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
How does the Tara work with the Sarah Lance?
What is...
How does the Tara work with the Sarah Lance problem in the character survival rate?
We'll get to her, but
it doesn't affect it because she's alive at the current time. Yeah.
but Arrow killed her, so they have the death flag.
Ah, interesting. But didn't they bring her back to the Lazarus Pit on Arrow?
It's on the later slide, I promise.
Let's talk about Legends for an hour. Okay.
We could talk about Legends for 2 hours.
So, like Mika said, this one is really straightforward, 0 to 100, based on percentage. So here's person of interest. There are 4 queer characters listed for the show. One is dead. I won't say who, spoiler alert. So 75% of queer characters live equals 75 points.
This is the part where I really thought my wife was going to leave me. It's really messy in here, but the concept of the character score is that we are trying to come to terms with good character representation. We want to reward good character representation. And we need to be relative to the stakes that are involved when you're talking about a movie versus a television show, TV movie versus a TV show versus a web series. And then we get to death again to account for, hey, look, Sarah Lance. See, I told you we got another slide that talks about her. Sarah Lance isn't dead currently, so she doesn't lose any points on the shows that she's on for being dead, except for the shows in which they kill her. That's just kind of how it works. This is why part of why Arrow has a worse score than Legends. Also, they don't have any main queer ladies. Yeah. Now, math nerds, you may rejoice. This is the formula. This took me a while to narrow out. It used to actually look worse. If you look at this, you say, okay, regulars get 3 points per regular. Recurring characters, guest characters, less points. Queer in real life gets more points. If you're transgender in real life, playing a transgender character, you get more points. If you're a transgender character who is not played by a transgender actor, you will be losing points. So if you have 4 transgender characters and they are all played by cis actors, you have a -4 for this. Add that all together, including the pain of that is death, and you will get a score for character representation on a show. Now, at the end, we do a little bit of a tweak where we alter the scores a little bit on a curve here because it's easier for a web series and TV movies to include queer characters. They don't have to argue about ratings. Did the first episode do well or not? They don't have that fight. And because of that, it's a little bit, I think it should be a little harder for them to score quite as high as a TV series who's going to have to fight every week to say, for God's sake, no, we don't want to kill off the queer characters.
Now, there's a lot of complicated math that goes into character scores, and I'm going to attempt to describe that in a visual way. A single character can have many attributes that contribute to the overall character score of a show. So let's look at one of my very favorites, Nia Nall from Supergirl. The role the character has, regular, recurring, or guest. the cliches that are assigned to them, the sexual orientation of the actor who plays the character, the gender orientation of the actor if they're playing a transgender character, and if the character has been killed off or not. And then we have the show types curve that Mika mentioned. So now, now that we've collected all that information on all the show's characters, how do we calculate the overall score? Let's look at one of my favorites, Anyone But Me, as an example.
Thank you.
Yes, Anyone But Me. We look at all the queer characters and assign points based on the roles they have. So, number of regular characters gets 5 points each, number of recurring characters 2 points each, and number of guests is just 1 to 1. Anyone But Me has 2 regular characters, 2 recurring, and 1 guest. So that gives them a total role score of 15. Yay. Now let's look at cliches and representation. Each one of these earns points, except for transgender characters being played by cis actors. That loses points. So characters with no cliches gets 5 points, characters played by out queer actors 10, transgender characters played by out transgender characters 10, and -5 for a transgender character played by a cis actor. So Anyone But Me gets 20 points because they have 2 out queer actors. They have 2 queer characters played by out queer actors. So this gives them a final cliche and representation point total of 20. Now, dead queer characters lose points. A show loses 3 points for every person they kill off. And no one's dead on Anyone But Me, so yay, death score 0.
Come on, you're slacking off, other room.
Now, we went through all these points through the character score formula, which is role score plus cliche representation score minus death score. So, Anyone But Me has 15 plus 20 minus 0, 35. So they have a character score of 35. But wait, there's one more thing. We have to run them through the show type curve, and since they're a web series, we divide their score by 1.25. So their final score is actually 28.
Now for the other crazy math section. It is funny. We broke up tropes. Television shows have tropes, and we broke these up into 6 types of categories. There are good tropes, there are bad tropes, and there are tropes that don't really account for anything. They just explain what's going on the show. If a show has no tropes, it gets, well, I think we changed that. Doesn't it get the most points anymore? If a show has no tropes, it gets 80 points. If a show has only good tropes, it's going to get 100 points. And things tend to break down from there. We're going to play math games with this, and it's time for another formula. Tracy, show them the math. The bonus points for ploy tropes, and these are tropes that may or may not be bad, or ploy tropes are always bad in context with tropes that may be bad. So Tracy will explain that in a moment, but the goal here was to balance out the mediocrity of most shows where they're doing bad things, but they may not necessarily be doing it for bad reasons. But just remember, if you kill anybody, you're losing more points.
Are y'all still with us? Are you awake? Is this fun? Is this interesting? Okay, we're in the final stretch here, people. Here we go. Show, trope, scores. The tropes first are put into good, bad, and neutral categories. So we have none, good, maybe, ploy, bad, and regular. So a maybe could be good or bad. Like a queer wedding could be awesome, right? But not if it's just for ratings. So maybe a ploy trope can turn a maybe into either, it can turn it bad, or if there's no ploy trope, then it's considered good. So this one's easy. If there are no tropes at all, it gets an 80, gets a B, because nothing bad happened, but nothing extraordinarily great happened either. Regular tropes do not factor into the formula at all. They are completely neutral. However, if a show only has regular tropes, that's a typo. It gets a 70, which is a C.
Oops.
I'll fix that. Everything else goes through Mika's very complicated math, which is the number of good and maybe tropes minus the number of ploy and bad tropes divided by the total number of tropes, not including the regular tropes. Times 100 gets you the trope score. So let's look at some examples. This is an example of a show with only positive. So 2 good, 1 maybe, 3 minus 0 ploy, 0 bad, still have 3, divided by 3, 1 times 100, trope score 100, because you only have good ones. Yay. Here's an example of a ploy turning a maybe into a bad. 2 good, 1 maybe, but you have a ploy, so you lose a point, and then divided by total number of tropes gives you 0.5, 0.5 times 150. Here is an example of mostly bad tropes. You have 2 good, 4 bad, this gives you a negative number divided by 6, which gives you an even more negative final score, but we don't use negative numbers, we just round it up to 0. So they get a 0, because it's mostly bad. So those are 3 examples of the trope score formula. But wait, there's more. Killing queer characters hurts the score and it'll lose 1/3 of its points. That's it, y'all. We covered all 4 subject areas.
Oh,
But wait, there's one more thing.
bonus points!
Woo!
Now I need to shout out Dr. Erica Abad, who put a bug in my ear about this and got me really working on this in a good way. How to write the intersectionality points so that they didn't overload in one way or the other. So intersectionality is a reward that you're going to get. You're going to get extra points. There's a max limit, of course, but these points will be added on to the total of the other sections, so it's not going to be affected by the death score. And we throw all of these numbers into a barrel, and it comes out between 0 and 100, and that's going to be a show score.
Bonus points. So we want to, again, reward shows doing good, and we do that with the intersectionality tags. So a show can earn up to 15 points for intersectionality. It earns 3 points each. So here's an example with Vita. They have 2 intersectionality tags, earning them 6 points.
Now this can be hard to visualize, so let's go through a show.
I'm just going to hang out over here.
Oh yeah, that's what you're going to do? I have to even learn how to use your clicker? Thanks.
Oh, it's okay.
No, I can do it, I got it. We're going to pick the L word, which I think Tracy picked and it wasn't me.
I did not pick the L word.
Well, the L word has a score of 73, and this comes from the scores in each area. So, for example, it's got a gold star because yes, it was made by queers, and it's got a lot of queer characters played by queer actors. Realness, we kind of rated it a little bit low. I don't know anybody who knows Shane. Quality and screen time, again, we're balancing these off of the shows. We add all this together. It gets a mess score because we really couldn't justify giving it a thumbs up. And it's not a show we love, so it kind of caps out here at 47. And that's okay, that's actually still pretty respectable. They have a ridiculously high character survival rate. They've only killed off 2. I actually thought it was more. This gives them a much higher score here than one might have expected, 96.7. The dead are coming back in the sequel boot thing. I don't know how, please don't ask me, I'll figure it out when we get there. Now, to be honest, the fact that the L word also gets a character score of 100 blew my mind. The thing was that they have so many characters that it all added up together. And this was how I figured out how to make that formula work at a level that they got a score that I thought was believable, and everybody else did too, because otherwise you just had the L word over here, we've got 62 characters, ha 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 ha. And you know, a show like Anyone But Me has only 5 characters, but is a much superior show. I will note that their number of characters balance out their really deplorable transgender score. And now again, we look at their show tropes, this is where they start losing points again, because guess what? Bury your queers. And they've also got the happiness and tragedy, and these things really hurt them when it comes to calculating the scores, that they're not showing happy endings for everyone, they're showing people ditching people at weddings. These are not really great things. But we're going to take these 4 things, we're say 47 plus 96.7 plus 100 plus 49.5 divided by 4, which is the what again?
Average.
And that gives you 73.3, which is your score for the L word. And at the end of the day, I think that's actually a pretty respectable score of this. And there you have it, math. You can have it back now.
I am not going to visually go through the scoring of the L Word. However, I have a treat for you all. I have actual video footage of Mika coding the score, the show of scoring formulas.
I hate you.
You love me.
No, I love her.
With this data we have collected, we can now generate a lot of statistics.
This is the breakdown of character sexuality representation. And you can see 64% homosexual. Someone was asking me about this morning too, and I couldn't remember off the top of my head. But you see we go homosexual, bisexual, heterosexual. This is the state of representation. It might be off by one, because I think we took the screenshot yesterday or the day before, but every time we add a character, it will automatically update that minute to give you the fresh data. So as we add characters, the data is updated live. And here's the breakdown of character gender orientation representation. Again, this is going to auto-update every single time.
It's in reverse order, sorry.
Well, that's okay. It's in reverse order, but actually that will show you how little representation we have of things that people like to call other. Don't really like that term. But, yeah, there we go. Oh, yay.
And how many characters are played by out queer actors? FYI, I am going through every single actor profile, because when we transitioned from a text field to an actual post type for actors, a lot of that data didn't merge over so great. So I am about 2/3 of the way going through every single actor profile and digging in the deepest corners of the internet to find out if people have self-declared their sexual and gender orientations. So I think when I am done this number is going to improve.
I disagree. We have arguments about this all the time. With stations, you have a list of the stations, how many shows they have, the percentage that these shows make of all shows that are on air, and average scores. Now, this is going to be all shows that have ever aired on YouTube, so it's not just what's on air today. And since we're an international database, we got to throw in countries. Japan is second because they've got so much anime. And so much anime actually does have a lot of queer representation. It's not always the best. And you'll notice that their average score, though, is actually pretty close to the US. That's not a great thing, United States. And this data is going to get better as we sample from more people's DNA at like Ancestry.com. As we sample more shows from other countries, sorry. And as people let us know, like they have today and yesterday and the day before, like, oh, you're missing this show. Great, I write it down. I'm going to get on that as soon as I get back to my computer. Now, finally, I wanted to have a look at death. And this is a depressing chart. So the little wiggly line is the trend line of how death should have gone based on the beginning of time. And those spikes are the number of deaths per year. And that particularly high spike is the year after Lexa died. 42, peak. That's not good. And if you notice that we're only in April and you can already see 2019.
With this data, we can use numbers and math to determine the state of representation. So, is it getting better?
Well, let's look at US network television. That's easy. It's a pretty small slice of the pie. This is historical data. You need to know that the CW is the baby network here, so while it has a shorter number of shows, notice how it has the most colors here? That's a good thing. It means that the CW has the most diversity of traditional linear network television in the United States. NBC, however, has the most gender identities represented on television. And that is also a good thing. It's not something I expected, but they have Law and Order, so it kind of skews their numbers a little bit. I wrote nothing for my notes on this slide. That's great. So here's your analysis results, though. And I wrote up an article, you can find it on Let's Watch TV, about how I broke through this. But the best on-air score, so the shows that are on air, the highest score went to the CW. This is as of a year and a half ago. CW's gone up since then because basically every single show on the CW has at least one queer character. I'm pretty sure Supernatural does, but I don't watch it, so I couldn't tell you for sure. I thought they had a man who was. Best overall score goes to ABC, CW coming up right there behind it. Most shows on air is Fox, which was not something I'd expected. And the most shows total is ABC, but they're actually the oldest of the networks that have been doing TV, so they kind of win there.
The good news is we are getting more shows, and those shows have better scores than ones in the past. However, if shows and scores are going up, why do we still feel unsatisfied? Why do we feel like it's not getting better? Mika is going to explain.
So this is a chart of shows on air that have had any qualifying character broken out by the years. In 2017, we had about 350 TV shows internationally. In 2018, you can see that number is starting to drop a little bit, but you can also see that the little red line, the little green line, shows gained and shows ended, they're sort of keeping pace with each other. So we're gaining as many as we're losing, and generally in an upward trend until last year. So then I started looking, well, let me look at the turnover. How many shows are we getting? How many are we ending? What's going on here? And you can start to see that the numbers are getting skewed in a funky way. And suddenly 2018 is not really looking that good. Why are we not getting more shows? Why did that number drop all of a sudden? Well, they're just not making new shows to replace the old ones. And worse, we have to fight tooth and nail to keep the ones we have. We're fighting for 2 shows that we love. In fact, they're shows we love on our site. And we have to fight tooth and nail to keep Winona Earp, to keep One Day at a Time. And that's just exhausting. That's why it doesn't feel like it's getting any better, because it's not really getting that much better. And if you pare it down to just the United States, you get a much better line that the percentage of shows that we lose is not going in the right direction. That line, that red line, needs to go the other way. But instead, the red line goes up and the blue line goes down, and that's not what should be happening.
So even though the numbers can be depressing, I'm still an optimist, and I am hopeful for the future. I think that the future is only going to be more fluid and more diverse. And if my daughter's generation is an indication of anything, like they are not going to stand for, they expect a certain level of diversity and representation, and they're not going to stand for anything less. So here are things making us feel good about the future of representation.
Black Lightning.
Happening right
They're
now.
right there. I wish I was there, because this is one of the shows I think is great. It's got great representation from the start. And they raised the bar by not being timid about Anissa's sexuality. In season 1, who had the only sex scene? Anissa. They also said that Grace was bisexual right from the start. And then they made her bulletproof. What is more powerful than this? The show has done well for 2 seasons. We're going to get a 3rd season, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen with this show.
Steven Universe. Steven Universe made history last season when Ruby proposed to Sapphire, and they got married in a big gem wedding.
I can't believe it.
Spoiler. I love Steven Universe so much, and the fact that this happened on a show for children on the Cartoon Network gives me a lot of hope for the future. I cannot wait for season 6 of Steven Universe and the Steven Universe movie coming out in the fall.
Vita blows my mind. It is amazing to see the diversity of representation. We're not just getting lipstick femmes anymore. We're getting butches, soft and hard. We're getting non-binary people. We're getting some very interesting scenes. We get everything else. Yeah, I'm going to pull back on that one. We're getting everything else, and this is written and created by queer Latinx women, and I love this show so much. Out women were involved in every aspect of this show. It's got quality stories.
And I love her.
I know you do. And season 2
She could blow smoke in my face.
Okay, that is really just you. Season 2 drops on May 23rd. It's just in time for my birthday. Celebrate it by watching the show.
And you can binge watch the entire season this time.
Yes.
Pose. Pose has the most queer representation in front of and behind the camera. Queer folks are involved in every aspect of the show, from showrunners, writers, actors. So we get authentic, quality representation. It was renewed for season 2, and that will air later this year.
Supergirl, first transgender superhero played by an out transgender actress. Yes, Supergirl is a problematic fave for many of us, but they are also the first show that did this. And the way that they made her sexuality and her gender identity a part of her being a superhero. That gives so much meaning and validation to people. And at San Diego Comic-Con, she spoke about the importance of this role, and now I'm really mad that the sound isn't working.
Yeah.
Yes, in a super suit.
Her character is going to save lives. I believe that.
I do too.
Batwoman, first titular superhero, main character to helm a show and be openly queer from day one as a character and actor. I learned from Mika that titular doesn't have anything to do with boobs. It is a show where the title is the name of the main character. And she is being played by out queer actor Ruby Rose. They introduced her in the last Arrowverse crossover, and they are filming the pilot for Batwoman right now.
Speaking of titular, Abby's is led by a bisexual Cuban-American actress playing a bisexual Cuban-American ex-Marine character. Abby's is the second Cuban-led sitcom, not since I Love Lucy. It's been a minute. Thursday's episode, just as ClexaCon started, she actually talked about how being Cuban impacted her coming out story, why she didn't tell people things. I'm not going to spoil the episode, but I really wish that people would give Abby's a chance.
Yes,
it's a
please
sitcom.
watch the show.
It's a sitcom, it's a paint by numbers, but it's fun, and they treat things with respect.
But the queer parts are really good.
The queer parts are really good.
Yeah.
So it's the future.
Those are the things that make us hopeful for the future of representation. But what do we have planned next for Les Watch TV?
We have an Amazon Alexa skill. You can ask Alexa about shows and characters and actors. It needs work and it needs improvement, but it's opening up the door to greater integrations with other apps and other websites.
And I think that should be our talk next year. Let's make a goal.
Oh, right, I need to
Our
finish the
Alexa
code.
skill.
Thanks.
We have a public Slack account. Slack is like an online messaging forum where people can chat in real time. We wanted to create a safe and friendly place for people to talk about queer TV. We wanted to be welcoming. People can talk about their ships. We have a live TV channel where you can talk about spoilers as they're happening. We have a fandom channel, and everyone is welcome to join.
LetsWatchTV.com/Slack.
Yeah, so go to our website and sign up for our Slack channel. We would all love to have you there. It's been really nice for ClexaCon because everybody's like, where are you? I'm in this room, I'm in that room. So it's really great. I like creating a positive community.
We also have WordPress plugins. We started this talk about WordPress. We're going to wrap it back around to WordPress. This plugin, anybody can put it on your WordPress site, and you can list, well, you could list the dead character, the most recently dead character if you wanted to. I know that one's depressing. You can also list the character of the day or the show of the day, and some of the statistics you can put on your own website to show solidarity, but also share information with other people. You know, if you're nerdy like me, it's great.
But most of all, we are going to keep watching and writing about television. We're going to keep adding shows and characters and actors to our database and tweaking and improving the site because we feel so passionately about positive representation.
But we're not where we need to be yet in terms of queer representation on television. And when you immerse a person in media where they do not see themselves, it is absolutely harmful. It is no better when you put the characters in the background than when you kill them off. You're not giving people positive representation.
And now, we would like to end our presentation by paying tribute to the 35 queer characters who have died since last year's ClexaCon.
Here's Wonderwall. No, wait.
We will remember you. If you know the tune, please sing along.
I apologize in advance. My brother's the musician.
I apologize in advance. I really can't play the ukulele.
One of us needed to be left.
You ready? Okay, Erica, hit the next.
I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't let your life pass you by. Weep not for the memory been tired and I can't sleep, standing on the edge of something much too deep. It's funny how we feel so much but cannot say a word. We are screaming on the inside but we can't be heard. I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't let your life pass you by. Weep not for the memories. I'm so tired. Oh, so afraid to love you, more afraid to clinging to a past that doesn't let me choose. Once there was a darkness, a deep and endless night. You gave me everything you had, ooh, you gave me life. I will remember you. You will remember me. Don't let your life pass you by. Weep not for the memory. I'm so tired and I can't sleep, standing on the edge of something much too deep. It's funny how we feel so much but cannot say a word. We are screaming on the inside but we can't be heard. I will remember you. Will you remember me? Don't let your life pass you by. Weep not for the memory.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sitting through all that. Does anybody have any questions?
Do we have time for questions? Nope, our cup has runneth over.
Oh, sorry.
But we will be here rest of today. We will be here tomorrow, and we are happy to talk
We
to you.
have boxes of swag.
Yes,
If anybody
please
wants it, feel free to ask any questions if you see either one of us at
Yes,
the con.
please do.
Thank you for coming and have a great rest of the conference.